Welcome, everyone, to the Ghost Helper podcast. I'm your host, Tina Erwin, and I have my co host for today, Chloe Scolaro. Welcome,
Hello.
Chloe.
Hello, how are you?
We discuss all kinds of things that are psychic, and today is a really special day because we're starting a series on beginning your spiritual path and what that's like. And what are the pitfalls, and what are the interesting things, and how do you know what's real? And how do you know what in the world to believe? And if you want to find out more about me, you can go to GhostHelpers.com and it'll give you some interesting information. So, with a little bit said, shall we get started?
Sounds good.
All right. When you start your spiritual path, you don't have a day where you're on a starting line and it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the gun goes off and off you go for your spiritual path. It creeps up on you. You didn't know you were going to start a spiritual path, and you wake up one day and you're a couple miles down the road.
Yep.
And now you got to figure out, what do I do next? Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Honestly, that is essentially what happened. I woke up one day and weird stuff started happening. But the best part was I was able to look back at my life, like even being a kid, and go, oh, that's what that was, because all kinds of weird stuff happens all the time. But if you don't know, then you just think it's normal or just you write it off. But then when you just kind of have more of an awareness, you can look back and say, okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. I didn't realize that that was what was happening until I retired from, well, I've been on a spiritual path all my life.
Hmm.
And you have times when you focus on it, and and everybody's path is different. So I'm kind of digressing slightly. I think I've been on it as long as I can remember because there was always something happening. But that's not necessarily true for most people. And while you might have a few interesting things happening along the way, there comes a moment in time where there's no mistaking it. You are
Right.
on this path and doors start to close, and it's like it narrows, and now you know you're going down this path and there's no going back.
Hmm.
And it's because you discover you have some type of psychic ability, or you have a friend, family member, or child with psychic ability, or something you're seeing or hearing doesn't ring true for you anymore, and
Hmm.
something shifts. And
Hmm.
I think that that's what happened with a lot of people. Do you remember how it started for you?
I do. I met somebody actually from a past life, and that kind of brought it all forward almost. I met somebody, and then people that I knew through them. It just kind of things started to click, and I started my journey a little bit different. Well, I guess maybe not so different. With tarot and all that kind of stuff. I feel like most people start that way before they know better, before they realize, that that's not the right way to go. But yeah, I met someone and then I met somebody through them and then they kind of got me into the whole process and then I started on my own journey on my own and I learned more that way. I went through a lot of new age spiritual stuff first, like books and podcasts before I found your stuff and then once I found your stuff I kind of, was able to get in contact with you and now here we are.
It was cool for me.
Yeah, go for me too. It's good.
I think also what happens is there's so much information out there. How do you know what's real? And even as we're having this conversation, the listener may say, well, that's just your opinion. And that may
Mhm.
be true. But there's comes a point for each person where you look around and you find within yourself, does that ring true for me? And that's how you know if what you're hearing is true. Does it ring true to the core of my being?
Mhm.
And that listening to yourself, listening to your subconscious, and listening to your higher self, that's your spiritual guide, not not something with a fancy name. It's it's that connection to the divine. And that's what helps you to follow where to go. And then what happens is all the synchronicities start to happen. You meet this person, just exactly what you said.
Mhm.
Things start to go click, 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 click until it's like now you're really riding the bicycle all the way because you're really able to, eventually you're wobbly, but you can finally eventually direct your path. But
Right.
but there's a lot of you go through a lot of starts and stops and difficult things along the path. And I I have a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks, from the spiritual school of hard knocks. The things that I didn't understand were dangerous, and I didn't understand how evil worked, and I didn't understand what was dangerous. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I had to learn that. And there are a lot of books out there, and some of them are very well meaning, but some of them are just, they're not necessarily true and they're dangerous.
Mhm.
That's how I started. And then I had some uncomfortable things happen and I almost died. And I had to make a choice. What was I going to do with the rest of my life? And then I made a commitment to the service of others for the rest of my life. So
Mhm.
we are all these, decades later, still doing that. And by the way, it really is a lot more fun when you look at your spiritual path as service to others, which along the way heals all different kinds of parts of you didn't even know that you needed to either address or to heal.
Right.
How did that feel for you?
I think that that's true for sure for me as well, and I'm obviously in a much different place in my path than you are, which is something I know we wanted to talk about is that some people get on this when they're in their 40s or in their 50s or 60s or 20s 30s. There really is no age limit to finding that part of yourself, and I know that you found it when you were much younger and now you're teaching everybody else, which is fantastic because that hopefully will translate into a whole generation of people that are doing it the right way when there are so many things out there that are kind of misleading. um yeah.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about what are kinds of starts. And you don't have to have psychic ability to start a spiritual path, but you have to create an awareness within yourself. And I would say the majority of people have a really tough childhood,
Hmm.
mainly because I have a lot of clients who have really tough childhood. So
Hmm.
but most people, that's a norm. A parent or a sibling made their life a living hell, and that it caused trauma and it caused damage and it caused illness. And part of the process of learning to heal themselves takes them into this world of the spiritual path and find
Hmm.
their way back to the divine. Other people wake up one day and they have psychic ability that could be 6 or 7 years old or 60 years old.
Hmm.
And I had one woman whose mother was in her 80s, and she was so psychic, and no, not a single family one member wanted to believe her, but her daughter did. And she was in North Carolina somewhere, and I got this weird phone call from her. Could you please help me? And we did. And she began to believe her mother. And when she used the tools that I was suggesting, because it's an experiment, try this, let's look at this, and here's why it works. Her mother started to sleep at night. Her
Hmm.
father was sleeping at night. Her mother was happy. Her mother wasn't sick anymore. It changed everything when they believed her, and her mother now had spiritual tools. And it was this huge shift. So age is irrelevant. You're not
Hmm.
late, you're always on time when you're starting to find out who you are and who you are in relationship to the divine.
Hmm. I have a couple questions for you while we're talking about this to kind of get us onto the path of what the right thing is. Definitely in today's day and age with social media, anybody can be a psychic. Anybody can do readings or can do tarot cards or can channel your loved ones. Or the big thing I'm seeing is pet psychics. People really want to hear their pets. And I am not judging because I also want to hear my pet. So I get it. But people are claiming that they can channel their pets, and that might not be fault. Like, people can do that. You've even talked about that in your book, that people are able to speak to animals, which is wicked cool. I wish I had that ability, but I don't. So I guess another big thing is people will say, like, you get signs from your loved ones that have crossed on. And that is kind of confusing for me because I know that, like, especially what we do is we cross people over, right? Like, you teach cross them over. That's, if you don't, then the soul stays in the fourth dimension. They become a ghost. Sometimes I don't even know that they're dead. So I guess what is the truth in that? Is, can you receive signs from a loved one if they're in the fourth dimension or if they're crossed on? Because this is going to be kind of a loaded question, but I know that, like, our souls go on journeys, right? And we go to the heaven world and we do a life review, and you reincarnate or you move on. How are you receiving signs from a soul that is progressing forward, that is going through the life review, or that is no longer in the fourth dimension because they've crossed on? Is that something that people are saying to make people feel better? Is that, like, how does that work?
Well, let me back up just slightly to the pet psychic,
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
because that's a very good question. Yes, there are people who are pet psychics.
Mhm.
Some people have made a living and they're complete frauds. If if you could hear every animal for a large percentage of the time and you learned the abuse, it would make you not a happy person.
Mhm.
And the pet psychics who do real service work with vets, because then if then they vet can then validate what the psychics, because I knew some preteens who were so good at this that they would volunteer at a vet's office, and the vet was astonished at what this young girl could do. And there was a pet psychic who worked for the San Diego Zoo, and they interviewed her, and they were having all these problems with elephants at the San Diego Zoo. This was in the 90s, a long time ago. And apparently one of the matriarch elephants had died, and they whisked the bones away. And the elephants have a process. They have a grieving process, a system, a tradition. They sway back and forth and they touch the bones and they say goodbye. The psychic basically tuned into the elephants told her what they needed. They brought all the bones back, and the elephants did this for I don't know how many days. And then the elephants had gone through their grieving process, and then they were able to go back to their lives. And then eventually the psychic said, okay, you can remove the bones now. Okay, so this woman was the real thing. She was doing a genuine service, and she wasn't abusing it. And I'm sure that the zoo paid her, but she came highly recommended. So, yes, there are people who are the real thing, and there's some people who are not. So, and sometimes if you are, sometimes you can hear your animal thinking, sometimes you can't. And
Sometimes I think I
it's
can do that.
and I think many pet owners can hear their animal because they're in resonance with each other. Again, it's a scientific magnetic principle. You're in what are you in resonance with? So that's an answer to pet psychics. As far as contact from loved ones, I see the stories about pennies or butterflies or
Birds, cardinals.
cardinal. Well, I'm not familiar with the cardinal one, but there are all kinds of things that cause people to say, I got a feeling or I got a sign from my loved one. Sometimes people who haven't crossed over are trying to get your attention to let them go. Say the crossing over prayer. If you stop seeing those signs, then you provided true spiritual service. Does that mean you won't ever hear from them again? No, that's not what that means. It means that part of the point of grieving and releasing a loved one to the higher realms is so that you break attachment. This is a very, very important concept. When you stay in a place of grief and holding on, then the soul isn't able to make the same level of progress, and you stay in a place of somewhat, I don't know what else to call it, but grief stagnation. Now, let's say that you crossed your loved one over. Can they still contact you? Yes, in the dream state. And the point the higher realms make to the souls who have crossed over is the living need to live. They do not need to stay in the past. They need to accept what cannot be changed. Death is not death is not always a tragedy. Sometimes it's the end of someone's life, no matter how they died. Some people live 6 years and some people live 60 years or 100 years. But you don't always live the same length of time every lifetime. So when you can look at death from a 30,000 foot view, where you're going, all right, because this person died, all of these other events happened, then you put death in perspective. When you accept death and get every possible thing you can learn from that death, then you grow spiritually. And a person who is in the higher realms has other work to do. They're on their spiritual path, either recovering from a very arduous life or a difficult death, or getting ready for another life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's those signs that can come in may bring you comfort. But I had a hairdresser tell me that she had signs from an old boyfriend that he desperately wanted to be crossed over. And until she met me, she could not figure out what was happening. Finally, she and several family members got together. They said the crossing over prayer, which is free on GhostHelpers.com. And they felt something in the room shift. And then a couple weeks later, she had a dream, and he was smiling and he was peaceful. And for the first time, she felt this huge weight lift off of her. And it reduces your grieving time and the severity of your grief when you cross over a person who has died. Makes a huge difference. So, yes, the signs can be, please help me. And then once they've left, coming to you in the dream state or the sleep state means they're thinking about you. Or if you're in a time of deep turmoil, sometimes they can offer you comfort.
What do you think about people that receive signs from the universe, not necessarily from dead loved ones or crossed over loved ones, but like I know that I have done this before where I've said, I want to see a ladybug, and or I want to see if this is real, because you're trying to prove to yourself that this stuff is real, that you're like actually not going crazy. Um, and then I saw a ladybug. I really did. Like how much of that is, do you believe that the universe sends us signs, or that whatever team is guiding us sends us signs when we ask for them? Or do we manifest those things on our own because we're looking for them now?
Well, it's a little kind of a complex answer. Depends on what you're doing. If you're just trying to get a sign for the exercise of show me a sign and prove to me you're real, yes, that can happen. If you're doing a lot of spiritual work and you wonder if it's making a difference, then the spiritual team that manages you, and you get promoted, by the way, as you go along, and that team changes as you go higher and higher. You have different team members that take you on to the next level. They can send you, can be a news article, can be a phone call, something you see on television validates what you just heard or what you just did. And what I have found is the validation is sometimes it's absolutely unnerving. So yes, that can happen. They can tell you But if you're expecting to get a check mark every time you do something or you ask the question, you might be disappointed. And because you don't want to create an artificial expectation that every time I do this, they're going to answer it. You get signs and symbols in funny ways. As an example, if you're concerned about something or you sense something and everywhere you look, it's a fire engine. I've had that happen. Or you see police cars, that's a symbol or the other side saying, yes, this is something to be concerned about. I've seen situations where, think about the last time you saw a hearse. I can't even remember the last time I saw a hearse. Well, if all of a sudden you see a whole bunch of them, that could mean that someone somewhere that you might know or peripherally know that some type of a death is coming. And that isn't a right, that's not necessarily good or bad. It's just the natural course of life. But you can also have situations where the higher realms warn you, and you have to pay attention to the warnings. It can be a dream, it can be road signs. And I've told the story where there was road construction coming up to the crest of this hill, and you absolutely couldn't see the other side. And it said slow. There was sign after sign after sign that said slow. Well, if you only looked at those signs as road signs and not spiritual signs, you could miss something gigantic. And in that moment, what I heard was, this is a spiritual sign. There's way too many slow down signs. When I came up the hill and I started down, there were two teenage boys, I get maybe not preteens, like 10 years old, riding their bikes back and forth across the road. And if I had been going any faster than 5 miles an hour, I couldn't have stopped. I would have killed them. And I said many prayers of gratitude for the slow signs. And I pulled over, stopped my car, and read these kids the riot act and sent them home. Took a lot of deep breaths and then moved on my way so that somebody didn't plow into us while we were having a conversation. It was a blind hill. It's just how it was. So when you start looking at, and there's a I think it's a Jim Carrey film, Bruce Almighty. And he keeps saying, God, why don't you show me signs? And the entire film is God showing him signs. And Morgan Freeman does a genius job of playing God, saying, I'm showing you the signs, but you're not paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
When you're starting your spiritual path, you don't want to become paranoid. Oh my God, is that a sign? But as you become comfortable in the rhythm of your days and you start to listen on a slightly higher level, then you catch these things and maybe you prevent problems before they start. And when that begins to happen over and over, then you begin to see that a spiritual path isn't just about, I don't even know what it's about, or being psychic, but about the day to day living, doing it in a happier way, a smoother way, a more service oriented way.
Mm-hmm.
Did that help?
That's good. It did, yep. And so you mentioned a spiritual team. I wanted to ask you about spirit guides because that's another thing that you hear a lot about when you're first starting out, and in a lot of the new age podcasts. They talk about your spirit guides, your spirit teams, and like when I was younger, I worked with a medium who told me about one of my spirit guides and said that they'd been with you for many lives, and they gave them a name, and they gave them, like they told you things about this spirit guide, like they were a person, or like they were like they had a personality or an ethnicity. And I guess I wanted to ask you what you thought about that, because I'm sure you've heard it too. Oh, this is my spirit guide, my spirit team. What really is that, and how much of what you hear in a normal space is accurate to what the truth is?
I have a variety of views about that. You have to be pretty far along before you have an awareness that there is a team with you. And it's extremely humbling. And when you first see it, usually people are dealing with tarot cards. And they believe that their spirit guide is working through them and the cards, or that they connected to spirit. And when you're first starting out, I would strongly advise against ever using tarot cards because it's an addiction like gambling or alcohol. And it's a weird thing. Even people who tell me that they don't use them every day will not willingly, they will not give up the cards. And I go, well, why not? Well, spirit tells me I have to keep them. I'm sorry, who are you talking to? Nobody needs tarot cards. It gives you a false sense of ego. And ego is the slayer of many a originally conscientious spiritual person. I'm choosing my words carefully here because when you are hearing, quote, a spirit guide will never ever tell you to use any kind of card. Angel cards, oracle cards, tarot cards, runes. They're all divination. I had one podcast host refuse to have me back because I didn't believe in divination. That wasn't entirely true. Dowsers who use dowsing rods to douse is a form of divination which has been proved scientifically for millennia.
What is dowsing? Because I've seen the dowsing rods, but what is the correct way to use them?
A good dowser, I met a guy who's had this funny name of Water Witching Charlie. And this man was so in resonance with water below the surface of the earth that he could tell you how deep a well was, that there's water beneath your feet. This is a city line. This is a sewer line. There's a well. There's a water source below you. It's 232 feet. It's 40 gallons a minute. And this is the mineral content. And this is the arsenic content. And this is potable water. This is not. The man was astounding, and he would scout out wells for big corporations who didn't use city water, or if they were way out in the country. And he's absolutely at the top of his field. Those are dowsers. And some dowsers are so in tune with the ley lines of the earth, they know how energy works and how energy runs. I have an enormous amount of respect for them. I've met many of them. I was at the Toronto Dowsers Conference, and I met some of the most fascinating people who very much tune into the earth. One of them told me something I thought was just absolutely fascinating. There was a mine explosion, and they were blaming the mine owner for not having enough safety protocols. But when they did the inspections, he had checked every box. Believe it or not, he had not. The mine owner hadn't done anything wrong, but they couldn't figure out what caused the explosion. They brought in a dowser of all things. And there's so much electrical energy now in the earth from 5G, 6G, which is now all over the place, from electrical lines buried in the earth, that the earth, which used to be a ground, is now conducting electricity. There was a lightning strike 20 miles away, traveled through the earth and blew up the mine. And they were able to prove it. And the dowser figured that out because he understood it. So scientifically, he was able to work with the scientific community, but he was sensing the earth. So when you have someone that's, no pun intended, that grounded, that is not using cards and thinking you're hearing something. Because when you're in the earth and you're working with the earth, then that's very different than working with cards. Because when you work with cards, you're expecting that someone else, you're hearing something and you think it's spirit. But if you're not performing due diligence, meaning you're not verifying who's on the other side of that veil talking to you, you don't really know who you're dealing with. Could be a black magician, it could be a ghost making you think something that's not real. And when you talk to spirit and you don't delineate, am I talking to a black magician? Am I talking to an angel? Am I talking to a spiritual being? If you talk, it's like saying, I'm going to go talk to people. Well, what does that mean? So when you say spirit and you refer to everything as spirit, you're not specific. What I'm interpreting that is you have a clue who you're talking to. And if you don't have a clue, then anything that you think you're hearing is suspect. And if you are working toward being a truly spiritual person, you do not need cards of any kind. You are listening to your connection to higher self. Now, you should ask me, how do you know that's not a black magician? Well, that's a good question. And again, this is one of the hardest things on a spiritual path is discernment. It's like walking through a minefield in an earthquake and a lightning storm. Tread very carefully. It's hard to know. If there are some tarot card decks that were written by some of the most hideous black magicians, like those who are doing all of the horrible child trafficking, wrote some of these decks, wink, wink. And they will make your life hell because when you're using a deck, that being on the other side has to be paid. Let me be very clear. Every time you own or use a card, they get a payment. It can be your health, your relationship, your wealth, your property, your child, your animal, because their payment is always in seeing you suffer every single time. They're not there for your higher good, ever, ever, ever. They feed your ego and make you think that what you're doing makes you feel puffed up and you have all this power. It's fake. Learn to trust yourself, learn to hear your intuition, learn to decide, discern. Does this ring true? And if it does not, back away. It will save your life.
That was good. So, with that being said, when people talk about guardian angels, what is your opinion on the phenomenon of guardian angels? Because we've already talked about loved ones and being passed on and how everybody has their own path. And then we just talked about spirit guides and spirit teams, but guardian angels is another like hot term that comes up. So, what is your opinion on that?
You earn the angels who are with you. Serial killers have fallen angels with them. They're not
Really,
guardians.
really quick, are they separate from your spiritual team? So, would you have a spiritual team and then you have angels, or are they the same?
You start out with beginning to request angelic assistance. A lot of people are very reluctant to do that at first because they don't want to impose on their angels. Angels earn karma for helping living people. There's a million movies about that, and they're like It's a Wonderful Life was one of those films. There's a Cary Grant film about that. The minister's wife, the reverend's wife, I can't think of it, David Niven in it, and Loretta Young. It's a really old film, older than I am. However, if you are struggling with something and you ask an angel for assistance, it's your first connection to the divine. And you ask the angel, and then you show gratitude to the angel. It's a give and take. In spiritual work, there is giving and there is receiving. Take is not a word I'm crazy about. I am receiving the help from the angel. I am giving the angel gratitude. So you're starting at a one-on-one level. And as you start to feel the angel, some people actually feel it on their arm when they're with them. If you're committing murder and robbery and doing all these horrible things, probably you don't have a guardian angel. Guardian angels are for and people say, well, how dare you say that everybody has a guardian angel? I don't think Jeffrey Dahmer and Richard Speck and the son of Sam Killer had guardian angels. They just don't. If they did, why would we have murderers like this? Somebody's listening to something that's not positive. But the people who hear something or they're warned about something, I got on a freeway one night and I heard somebody say, change lanes right, move right 2 lanes immediately. And I'm a naval officer. I take orders. So I moved right 2 lanes. And I looked back over and there were all these railroad ties in the fast lane. I thought, oh my God. And that was actually took place almost 40 years ago. I never forgot that. It was terrifying. And it was dusk. I wouldn't have been able to see them till I was right on top of them. So as you develop this partnership with an angel and you learn to listen and discern, then what you realize is, all right, I received this guidance and I'm grateful for it. Gratitude goes a very, very long way on a spiritual path. And virtually everyone I know who is truly genuine in this will say the same thing. If you are grateful to the higher realms, and as you do more and more complicated, difficult, challenging spiritual work, you need more counselors. I call them counselors of divine wisdom. They have names. And if you're trying to understand healing, what happens is these beings can see those who are trying to understand, how do I help this person or my child or my neighbor? What tools can I have? And magically a tool will appear. You'll listen to a podcast. Someone will hand you a book. That has happened to me for easily 30 years. Someone came and said, I was told in a dream to give this to you. It's like, really? This woman gave me the breastplate of the 12 tribes. It's like, who has that in their house? Another person walked in and said, I was told in a dream that you had to have this book. It was an amazing book. It was exactly what I needed at that moment. And that person was a conduit to help me. So when you're on this path and you're trying to walk the straight and narrow and stay balanced, you're going to get some help from extremely unusual places. You don't want it to just be from something like cards, and you don't want to limit it. And maybe you have a spirit guide, and I just never use that term because it's limiting.
Mm-hmm.
Just connecting to beings in the higher realms, and eventually that farther and farther along and did this work one-on-one with clients, I needed a much more sophisticated team. And then you learn how to hear them, and that's a whole nother ball game.
Mm. You said something interesting. You said that angels earn karma. Why do angels need karma? What are they using their karma for?
Well, angels have a hierarchy, and to get promoted is not unlike the military. You have to do service, and the more service they do, the more they have experience. One of the most remarkable shows that was ever on television was Touched by an Angel with Roma Downey and I can't think of her name. She and Roma Downey did an amazing job with Touched by an Angel. And I'll think of her name. She was so good. She stole every scene she was in with a soft Southern accent. And John Dye played the Angel of Death. And what it showed you is that angels had work to do with humans. And there was a limit to what their intervention could be. Now, most people don't have an angel, get all glowy and say, I was sent by God to help you. But sometimes you are the messenger and somebody works through you. An example is my brother tells the story of being on an airplane, and there was a father and son. The father was by the window, the son was in the middle, and my brother's on the end of this 3 seats. And the father and the son are having this discussion. The son says, I'm not going to college. I know you want me to, but I'm not going to do it. And so my brother says, well, have you any idea what it's really like? And the guy said, that's my dad just says, I have to go. And he says, dude, why would you miss out on one of the most astonishing experiences of a lifetime? And they had this amazing discussion, and he was saying words he couldn't believe were coming out of his mouth. He didn't plan them, and they were so well said and so logical. And the father was dumbfounded, and the young man listened on a whole new level and said, I never looked at it that way. I was just trying to fight my dad. And he said, well, maybe you don't need to fight your dad. Maybe you need to embrace an experience that he's trying to offer you. Maybe there's a different view. And when the two men got off the plane, they said goodbye to my brother, and he never knew what happened. But the father and son could see each other differently. In that moment, he was a tool of the light side. And you may find yourself in that position as you're starting this path where you're using wisdom and you're allowing yourself to say wonderful things, healing things, things that bring insight and calm or help to resolve a situation.
I feel like that. Sometimes I'll say things and then I don't have no idea what I just said. I don't remember it. It's almost like I black out and someone's like, wow, that was really profound. I'm like, great. Can you tell me what I said? Because I don't,
Exactly. Exactly. It's happened to me for years and years.
like it
Eventually,
came out so fast, I couldn't register what was happening. So what did I just say? And they're like, that was great. I'm like, which part? Oh, I don't remember. Yeah, that's funny.
but
Um,
it happens. That's exactly how it happens.
yeah. And you do some really good work, so good that you wish you could hear it yourself. But I guess I actually heard that something today that was really interesting where, oh man, it was something I saw on social media where a guy was saying that if you said it to somebody and afterwards you said that, you're like, dang, I wish I would have told myself that. Then the message wasn't for you, it was for them. Or it was something. I gotta figure it
Then the
out.
message wasn't from you.
Yeah, that
It was
too.
from the higher realms for another person. And you had a high enough frequency to allow yourself to be an instrument of spiritual service. Let me say that
Mm,
again. You allowed yourself to be an instrument of spiritual service in that moment
yeah.
that furthers you along the path.
While we're talking about angels, and we were talking about signs and synchronicities, angel numbers are a really big thing now. People get them
Angel
tattooed.
numbers.
Yeah, like so they're called angel numbers, but there's like 444, 1111, 222, and they have all these guides out there for like what they mean. Like 444 is allegedly protection, all the synchronicities that you were talking about. I see numbers a lot, usually on license plates. And I know that it's not a coincidence because I don't see them all the time, but then randomly out of nowhere, I'll see like just a rapid fire bunch of them. And it makes me pay attention, which is why I think that's my little white flag because I see it and I go, oh, let me pay attention to that. But they're called angel numbers. So I was wondering if what you thought about that. If that was real or if that was
I
new age baloney.
I don't I have to be careful about judging it because I'm not familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put a lot of store in it, sometimes you see a number. I had a woman who kept waking up at 3:33 in the morning every single morning.
Yep.
Well, in that type of a scenario, it may be that in a past life something happened at 3:33. It could be that something will happen. It could be that that number has a significance for that individual at some point, and she just needs to be a little more vigilant and in looking for it. But to assign a particular number, and there's an entire study of numerology. This is a little different from numerology. And the science of numbers, people spend lifetimes on it. There are three the three of the most powerful numbers are 369. Virtually all scripture passages add up to 369. Any derivative of those three. The solfeggio frequencies, that range of frequencies, always end up with a 369 type of thing. So when you're looking at that, and is there a particular angel number? I've never heard that. Just because I never heard it doesn't make it not so. I don't think you need that. And it's like there are all these clickbait things that make you think I need to know what my magic angel number is. Maybe. Just you can observe it, but I don't know that I'd put a lot of stock in it.
It's very serious, people. I mean, and I'm not talking negative on it. I mean, I've definitely, paid attention to it, but that's a very big thing nowadays. I mean, people get them tattooed, people get them with gold necklaces on, people change their license plates, or it's huge. I'll have to get with you offline about that. But it's very new age. It's really like it goes along with the whole love and light and spirit guides, because angel numbers are messages from your spirit guides. So it all kind of ties together.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I
definitely
I
interesting.
I yeah. It feels like it's a fad. If you looked at it over the last 100 years, it simply didn't exist. And when you look back through time, what has lasted through time spiritually are some of the things to really look at and to understand would be my thought. And it's not tarot cards. And I know some people put an enormous amount of focus on numerology and astrology.
Hmm.
Astrology is a blast. Linda Goodman's Sun Signs was one of my favorite books because she talked about characteristics that were based on resonance with stars, but she talked about personality types. And if you are wedded to what your horoscope is every day, that's just as much of an addiction as anything else. Some people won't go out if the stars aren't lined up correctly. Well, I don't want to be ruled that way. I want a lot more freedom than that. So I would suggest that astrology can be a great deal of fun, and some people have their star charts done. But at the end of the day, it's more fun to just look at personality types. If you want somebody super organized, man, you're looking at September people. If you want people who make money, it's usually Cancerians. But Cancerians don't hit things head on; they go sideways. Or Capricorns are great politically, and on and on and on. But you don't want to paint every single person with the same brush, because the amount of theme and variation just in astrology, just in the numbers that attach to astrology, is the permutations of that are virtually infinite. So trying to nail something down on it, maybe not as scientific as we would think.
This is kind of a rabbit hole question, but is there a reason that we're born on certain days of the month and that we assign ourselves certain, numbers and star signs, and, do you pick your birthday for a specific reason before you come in?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think that part of it has to do with personality type. And every personality type has certain karmic things to overcome. And they have to, and maybe it's helpful to look at the personality type, and certain days have certain significance. Okay. And if, let's say you're a Pisces, traditionally, Pisces people are really sensitive. Are all Pisces people psychic? I don't know. Are a lot of Pisces people psychic? Probably. Um, so but you could be a Scorpion person and have a moon in Pisces, and then you could be really, you could have this unusual spirit complex,
Mm-hmm.
or Sagittarius, or and all astrological signs have great personality traits and really negative ones. Take Scorpion. It's the only sign in the zodiac that has three paths: the stinging, vicious scorpion, the gray lizard, and the soaring eagle. So, how do you decide which one you are? Look around at your life. If you're a Cancerian and you can never hit anything head on, is that something you need to learn how to do? Or if you're an Aries and you just make that same mistake over and over and over, you just keep ramming your head, maybe learning to back off from that and seek better balance are the lessons of the sign. And that may be a better way to look at astrology. I think there's some merit into some of the personality issues with each sign. And I think that compatibility are certain elements of it too. I think it can be a lot of fun, but you can learn a lot of things from it as well.
Yeah. One last rabbit hole question, and then we'll get back on track to end the show. But I know that you've already talked about how in past lives you can have similar personality traits, like the soul kind of keeps its personality. So do you think that we probably are born in the same month multiple times if we're trying to figure out that stuff when it comes to overcoming personality traits and overcoming, the soul's evolution? Is that, do you think, probable?
I think anything is possible. I think that you're born into a particular month with certain personality traits to do the job you're here to do. And those personality traits can absolutely facilitate your work in this lifetime. Absolutely, without a question. And I think if you were to analyze them, and again, that's why I keep referring to Linda Goodman's sun signs, because she's a very dynamic Aries personality. And she takes a lighthearted view of all of it. But it helped me to understand my siblings, my parents, my bosses, and how to work with them in a way that makes everybody come out a winner. That's what I liked about her work. And I think I got my first book when I was 8. I started studying some of these things. I couldn't figure out why 4 children were so different. Can we be this different from the same parents? And that helped me understand it, but it doesn't explain the karma of why you're in that family or what your birth order is. That's not astrology, that's karmic. So we're very complicated as souls, which is why I wrote Soul Evolution, Past Lives and Karmic Ties, because it enables you to understand, how do souls evolve? What do you need to learn each lifetime? And sometimes people have a goal, which is just to survive childhood. And some people have a spiritual mission, which takes them down a very different, often very difficult road.
Well, I have one last question, and then I think we're out of time. We've talked a lot about what is real and what maybe is not. And I think we maybe have to do another one because we didn't even talk about the thing we said we were going to talk about. Because we always have such flowing conversations, we always forget the main.
Exactly.
um, but where can people? You always talk about the karmic rules, and this is the karmic universal rule. Where can people find that?
I in the book Psychic Children, Psychic People, I have a whole section on spiritual law.
That's the word I was looking for.
And there are many, many books on spiritual law. Dr. George King from the Aetherius Society wrote some great books on spiritual law. Frank Alper, who wrote some great books about Atlantis, if you can still find his books. He wrote books on spiritual law. The Buddhists write books on spiritual law. What's a spiritual law? As above, so below.
Mm.
The law of correspondences, the law of giving and receiving. What you fear the most, you attract. Um, for instance,
Can,
go ahead.
can you explain as above, so below really quick? Because that's one that I hear all the time, and I feel like I have a good general concept of it, but I also always think about this movie. That's kind of the scary movie. Um, it's a good watch. It's definitely creepy, but for some reason I always think about that and not about the actual meaning. So,
As above, so below. It's as if when you see an iceberg, that's what's above, but below it, there's even more. When you see the branches of a tree, that's above. When you look at the roots, they spread out to the exact circumference of the tree.
mm,
So it becomes a mirror.
mhm,
So the inner person, the outer person, and the inner person. So above is my outer persona, but the inner persona is mirrored. So if I'm at peace inside and I'm projecting peace, then I am at one. I'm a oneness. If you go into a house that's complete chaos, I mean, it's a disaster. It's a filthy mess. The yard is a mess. They're hoarding. That's the above or the outer part of you, and the inner part of you is completely shut down. There's no energy flow. The person is sick. And so it's what are you projecting and what is the reality inside of you? When you are one, when you are in balance, which is the entire point of feng shui, it's about balance, which is a whole nother show. When you have that kind of balance, then the things are still going to come, but you can gently ride over them like a wave. But if you are out of balance, you're floundering and you're drowning. The spiritual law, to stay in spiritual law and to study spiritual law, is one of the, I'm glad you brought this up, it's one of the most critical elements of being on a spiritual path. Because once you understand spiritual law and you now own that knowledge, you dare not violate the law. And it's respect for another person's process where you suspend judgment. If you can't, for instance, you can't want something for someone that they don't want for themselves. You can't want something for someone that they have no capacity to give you, but you keep pushing and pushing and pushing to get it. It's not ever going to happen. And you're the problem, not them. So when you start studying spiritual law, it has a tendency, if you take it to heart, to begin to bring you into balance. And then you begin to always seek balance all around you. And when you do that, then that begins to echo out from your body, your heart, your mind, your dwelling, your car, your property, your job, and that's the vibe you're sending. You're sending out a frequency of peace and balance. And it doesn't mean you don't get mad some days or you have a tough day. It just means that because you're seeking balance, you're looking at the world differently. And when you do that, you really embrace the spiritual path because you're not just believing everything you're told. Excuse me, you're questioning it, you're evaluating it, and you're looking at how does this keep me in balance? And you're not operating from a place of fear or insecurity.
that was good. All right.
Well, I think that was a really fast hour. I think I blinked.
I know that was a fast hour.
Well, then I'd like to thank you for, you know, putting forth all these super great questions, and thank everyone who's listening. And we're going to get this ready for YouTube. GhostHelpers.com is the website. On the website are all these 9 books that are talk about this. And in Psychic Children, Psychic People, there's a suggested reading list, because there's some wonderful, wonderful authors out there that I, want to share with people too. So, Chloe, thank you with all my heart. And you know
Thank
what,
you.
girlfriend? We're going to do this again.
Yep. I'll see you next time.
All righty. Bye bye.